Thank you. There's no minutes, but start up with new business. Discussion of possible approval of funding options for Article 1 on the October 16th, 2023 annual town meeting warrant. Hand it over to Mr. Collins to kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start by just making sure that everybody has the documents that you should in front of you. You should have an agenda. You should also have what is the draft article for the October 16th town meeting, Article 1. You should also have a free cash analysis with a couple different proposals. That's multicolored like this. And you should also have a letter from the Cape Cod Commission that was received today. And you should also have a memorandum dated September 27th from the Treasurer Tax Collector. And you should also have a folder with various policies. The first one is what I refer to as the primary one. It concerns policy 71, 72, and 73. And then there should be a second folder with policy 67 and 70 in there. So if there's any references to policies during the course of this discussion and you want to check anything, it's right there in front of you. So let me explain why I respectfully requested a joint meeting of the Select Board and the Finance Committee. The Select Board executed the warrant for the October town meeting, I believe, August 28th. And then on October 3rd, there was a certified free cash in the amount of $15.3 million. That was certainly higher than anticipated. So the special joint meeting was for the purpose of reviewing and discussing options relative to Article 1 for the October 16th town meeting warrant, not to be confused with option 9. So the town has historically been conservative regarding financial policies and practices, and this has led to a long-term stability that other towns, quite frankly, may envy. My purpose in being before you this evening is to provide professional counsel and advice in terms of options with support of the finance team in order for the policymakers and the financial committee members to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the options that you have. The objective is to avoid making any decision that risks the stability of the town, the financial stability that is, but also to balance that with the borrowing, which should be as little as necessary to fund a project that has been identified as a priority unanimously by the Select Board and the Sewer Commission. So essentially, to put it bluntly, you have three options. Probably more if you wish to explore them. Option 1 is to do nothing and to let this go before October 16th town meeting. If you were to do that, you might ask, well, what are we doing here? I would be remiss in my obligations to you, I feel, if I didn't bring to you the fact that there's $15.3 million in certified free cash. I wouldn't want to go into town meeting and just spring that upon you. I don't think that's right or fair to you as policymakers. So option 2 would be to take the amount in Article 1 completely out of free cash. And option 3 would be to take a portion out of free cash. I can say that when I saw the amount, I was inclined to say, take all of it out of free cash. I did sit down with the finance team, and they expressed a lot of concern relative to that particular option. It is primarily relative to policies and making sure that we follow the policies that have been established by the board. And if we breach those policies, the possibility exists that S&P may determine that it puts at risk our AAA bond rating. Obviously, as I sit here right now, I can't tell you specifically what the operational requests are going to be or the capital request. Although they have been submitted, we have not had an opportunity to review all of them. There's also the possibility that an article comes in that requests funding. What that may be, that's obviously determined by committees, commissions, and by departments relative to needs. I think we have a CIP or capital improvement program that is fairly progressive in terms of making sure that we take care of all of our mission-critical needs. I would not want to do anything to put that at risk, but by the same token, I recognize that this, and when I say this, I'm referring to Article 1, is identified, has been identified as a priority for the town by the board and by the sewer commission. So I'm here to answer your questions. The finance team should be behind me somewhere. And if you have any questions of them or of me, then certainly I'm here to answer them to the best of my knowledge and judgment. Whether it be Finance Committee or Select Board.
Makes sense that, good evening.
Good job on the introduction, boss.
I don't think an introduction is needed, right? I don't know how we want to start, if someone wants to.
I have a question.
Kayla? Go
Thank
ahead.
you, thank you. I think my question is, first of all, when you realize that we had $15.3 million in certified cash, which is a lot of taxpayer dollars that are sitting here, I think what I heard you say is that initially you thought you would take be able to take the $7.5 million, which is the cost of the design, from free cash. And what is different?
Okay, essentially what is different is if you take a look at this sheet here, this colored sheet, if you take a look at the upper right-hand corner, you'll see my writing in number 1. It says using $7.5 million for Article 1 from free cash, and the second one is using $4 million for Article 1 from free cash and borrowing $3.5 million.
Yep.
What I would point out to you is, according to the analysis, it would result potentially in a $2 million deficit by May. So the breakdown in terms of how we get there is on this sheet. And that is strictly adhering to policy established by the board, which includes a certain percentage going into capital stabilization and a certain amount being put aside for operational costs.
May I? Okay, thank you. So the policy, are you talking about policy 71 or 72? 72? About, yeah, stabilization?
Yes.
15, okay. One of the questions I have about this is, I see this as the policy. I'm wondering if, again, with this much money, taxpayer money sitting here, I'm wondering, since the policy says 15% of those certified funds into capital stabilization fund to be used for future capital use. Isn't this future capital use? So wouldn't you be adhering to the policy, even taking that 2.3 million
So
for capital use?
Yes. I'm going to let the finance team elaborate. To answer your question, yes, that was my thought.
Okay.
In terms of capital, obviously, we try to put something into capital consistent with this policy in order to keep that fund stable, in order to make sure that we are able to fund all of the items that are on the CIP program consistent with whatever fiscal year is approaching. I can say that it would, I guess, and I'm going to let them answer, but it would technically go in to stabilization, and then it would come out, I believe, by 2/3 vote. And from, I guess, my perspective, without having the financial background that the folks next to me do, I was thinking if it's going in and coming right out, it's a one-step process. But on the other hand, they warned me about jeopardizing some items that could be coming down the pike that I'm not even familiar with yet because we haven't gotten to May. And I'm going to let them elaborate.
May I start?
Go ahead.
So this capital stabilization policy was put into place because our capital improvement plan used to be severely underfunded. So we tried to come up with a way to plan ahead for capital items and set some funds aside for, it's not meant for major items. It's, if you read the policy, we're hoping to keep it under $200,000, somewhere around there. So vehicles, small purchases, things of that nature, these funds can be utilized without asking the taxpayers to raise their tax dollars. So the Select Board approved this policy to set aside these funds. This has been in place for several years now, and it's been very successful. A lot of times we've put money in and we've taken it right back out. So there's been years when it hasn't been able to build up as much as we'd like, but it saved us from raising those funds for whatever that capital item was in taxpayer dollars. So it's a good financial policy to be prepared for some capital items that might be coming down the road that either A, we are planning on, and we know, police vehicles being a perfect example, we know those are on a replacement plan, and those are going to be items. Do you want to borrow for that? No, those are small, I'm going to call them small ticket items. These funds are available for that. They offset a lot of the HVAC. If you remember in the FY24 capital improvement plan, we used $1 million to offset the school HVAC project. That's a significant amount of money, probably more than what we had intended when this policy was put into place, but it helped move that project forward. So if you take these funds out, first of all, I have to say the funds would not be able to be removed until May. All you could do is put the funds into the capital stabilization at this point in time. You cannot vote them out until May through a 2/3 vote. And if you were going to do something of that nature with the intention that it be for wastewater, we have a wastewater stabilization fund. So to me, once you start mixing these stabilization funds, it starts getting a little more murky as far as what the intention of them is for. When you put money into a wastewater stabilization, it can only be used for wastewater purposes. It can't be used for police vehicles. It can't be used for any other capital items. So that's the other piece to it. The other, my other concern with putting it into the capital stabilization is we don't even know what is coming for FY25. Literally, budgets were just submitted. The October 1st was their due date. They were due a couple days early because we had a major financial software upgrade. But we literally just received those. We haven't had a chance to look at them. We don't know what the capital requests are. I haven't even seen any of the capital requests. So for me to say, yeah, take all this money and do what you want with it, that would be irresponsible for me because I can't tell you what the needs are right now or even what they look like. Eventually, it will be the town manager and the capital improvement committee and then finance committee and everybody else's decision on where it moves from there. But I can't even tell you what the requests look like at this point in time. So I think it would be very difficult for me to say, put this money aside when I don't even know what the needs are for the upcoming fiscal year.
And if I could just explain my rationale. I know that Article 1 is a priority. That was crystal clear with the unanimous votes from the Select Board and the Sewer Commission. What I did not want to do is to go into town meeting October 16th and somebody pop up and say, gee, you've got 15.3 million in free cash and you're asking us for 7.5 million, and essentially jeopardize what is a critical vote. That was my thought process.
Just one more.
We're trying to get everybody to,
I understand. I just have one more, and then
Go ahead.
I'll stop asking for now. I have a question with regard to, and one of the things that brings this up for me is, again, looking at that huge amount of free cash. So I have a question with regard to Policy 73, because Policy 73 suggests that unappropriated cash available in the range of 5 to 10% of the annual operating budget is what we will strive to maintain. So we're at 20%. So, well, 20% of the operating budget.
This number here, it's actually the lowest, it's 5%. What that policy means is
Yep.
your ending balance of free cash on June 30 should be 5 to 15, or 5 to 10% of your operating budget.
Yep.
Not right now. It's when we end the fiscal year in June, you're supposed to, the policy says, we would like to bring over at least 5% of your operating budget. Right now, the budget requests are almost 75 million from what I
Yep.
saw. So this number that you see, the carryover number of 3,750,000 is 5%. That's the least amount that the policy allows if you follow the policy. So the 3.7 million is the lowest amount to carry over. You'd have to double that if you wanted to meet
Right.
the 10%, the higher amount to carry over. And that, that is, if you look at the Department of Revenue's fiscal healthiness, they have a great bulletin. That's one of their things that they point to when you are looking at your free cash. Don't use it all, is
Right.
what they say. Because if we had nothing else certified, we would at least move into the new fiscal year with 3.7 million.
Right, right. We have, but we have 8 towns on the Cape, including us, that have a AAA bond rating, right? And as I looked at those, with the exception of Barnstable, which is still lower than what we are, people's free cash is right around 10 to 12%. Some of it's lower than that, and those are the AAA. So I was just curious if other towns are going with balances of 8%, 9%, what the rationale would be to keep us at 20% when we have the free cash and we have this big ticket item. That is important, I think, to everybody, and that's a concern that I have.
I think there's some confusion possibly about what is certified versus what you end up the year with. And maybe not, I don't know. And the free cash amount, if you look in the, I pulled some history, for the last several years, and COVID seemed to change things because we had a big infusion of federal funds. There was a lot of COVID money. We had a lot of buildings shut down. There was a lot going on. There was a big change in the world, including the financial world. So when we started FY '21, which would have been July 1st of 2020, the free cash that was certified for that fiscal year was a little over $9 million. We ended up the year, we did not spend a whole lot that year, and we ended up with, let me see. About 5.5 million. So that was our starting point, was the 5.5 million. We certified 13 million. At the end of the fiscal year, we had used everything except 5 million. We had certified another 13 million. We went down to 7 million. Then this certification, that extra $2 million that we ended up with on June 30, from 5 to 7, is where we got to the 15 million. Consistently, we have been at $13 million for the last several years, the last few years, certified free cash. That bump was due to us having $2 million remaining in that free cash balance on June 30. So this isn't something that we just are going to continue, unless you don't spend it. I mean, if you don't, whatever you don't spend just reverts or goes into the next fiscal year. And that's how that balance went from 13 million that had been pretty steady for a couple of years. It went up because of that balance.
Carol, do you have a?
Now, the question I have is, our triple bond rating allows us to borrow money at a lower rate. So by not using all of that money, the 7.5 million out of free cash for scenario number one, that we would lose that, wouldn't we? Because that would bring it down.
Well, what you'd have to do is, I mean, you'd be essentially.
Because we don't know what's in CIP.
As Dawn mentioned, the $2 million of negative you have to come up with somehow or another.
That's right.
And, if you choose to go below 5%, you've broken one policy.
That's right.
If you choose to reduce your capital stabilization appropriation, you've broken another policy. You start breaking policies, S&P is going to look at you and go, you're breaking policies, your policies are no good. There is 20% of your AAA bond rating score. So, yeah, it's going to go down because you're breaking policies.
So if we don't go with scenario one of paying the whole thing and go with the scenario two of doing the 4 million for the state, for the design and engineering, how would they look at that? By just taking the 4 million out,
They're going to look more favorably on it because you're
Favorable?
not breaking your policies.
right?
I guess I would say, well,
Because we don't know what's in CIP.
correct.
That's concerning, because we don't know what buildings are going to need work next year.
So we're going to get into,
Well, if I could, I would just add, just because it's requested doesn't mean that they have to
Oh, I
receive it.
understand that, but we don't know what's ahead.
Yeah.
right, and that's, so just real quick, from the finance, I mean, I always defer to the finance team. We got an amazing finance team. In your opinion, as Selectman Sherman just mentioned, using 4 million of free cash in this scenario, is the finance team from the town of Mashpee, are you comfortable with that recommendation? And then it's more of I'm curious about your answer, and then I'd like to have everybody, chime in.
First, I'll just make a comment, and Craig can, he wrote some notes about that. If you look at the scenario using $4 million and you follow it down without any capital, any free cash used for capital, the very bottom, if you follow your own policies, you're left with 1.4 million. That means in May, if you need grant, local matching funds, you will have to really watch your articles that are being submitted, what you put on the warrant. Anything utilizing free cash is going to dip into that 1.4. So you have to be aware of that. If you start putting articles on there for 500,000, 250,000, 100,000, all of that adds up, and that's eating into the 1.4. So it's really, where do you want to go when the fiscal year ends? Where do you want your free cash balance to be? And what do you want to move into the next fiscal year?
What would you suggest? What scenario?
So-
Maybe there's another scenario
We-
here.
Dawn and I discussed this. We strongly recommend you leave Article 1 as it is. Few reasons. One is our plan to treat the $7.5 million is very similar to the 2.48 on Phase 1 with the plan and construction. And I remember this discussion vividly as the select board was sitting there trying to figure out how they want to do stuff. And I said, hey, this is my plan. And I stated my plan, and you all went, that's a good idea. And it was 3 or 4 years ago, I planned on getting the authorization to borrow, and then borrow for a year or two, 2.48 million, then go to town meeting, get the articles together, pay off the amount with the interest from the WIF and the wastewater stabilization funds that had been received. We did that. We paid a total of $56,000 of interest. $43,000 of it was covered by the wastewater and WIF stabilization fund. Okay? With $7.5 million plan, it's similar. Get the authorization to borrow, an amount that's needed for short term, come back to town meeting, ask for the articles to take the money from the WIF and the wastewater stabilization fund as much as we can. If you put money in the wastewater stabilization at the May town meeting from free cash, when we know better what our capital needs are, we have revenues from the WIF collections and the wastewater stabilization. We'll have to bond considerably less, and thereby saving interest costs in future years. If you put free cash in a motion of the article, you'd be using it now without knowing what the future uses might be needed. In May, we'll have better known the funding requests, the capital budget expenses that come up during the year, snow and ice and others. So we would not recommend using the free cash in the motion. That's our answer.
Okay.
Jeff, you want to have, if anybody from the Finance Committee, and then we'll come back, we'll go back and forth. Yeah.
I've actually got a couple of questions myself. Do we know what the balance of the capital stabilization fund is?
Yes. That right now is
About 3 million.
3 million.
And the balance of the wastewater infrastructure,
Just under $1 million.
just under $1 million?
Is that correct?
700,
Yeah, at the end of it.
around 700,000. Just printed that actually. 710,000.
710,000, thank you.
You want to?
Any other questions from the Finance Committee? Mr. McKelvey?
Good evening to you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. So, I mean, I like the idea right off the top of the bat of spending $7.5 million from free cash. Okay, that makes sense. However, that's an emotional reaction. You see something that's shiny, you say, "Ooh, let's use it for this." Well, we know we have other expenses coming down the road. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Collins, we have a new department to fund in the near future. And that could be anywhere between 80 million to 150 million, depending on what it is. So we have things coming down the pike that are operational. I think operational expenses are also real important to look at down the road. So how does that all factor into this for me? I do like the idea of having a revenue source. I've spoken about it before this committee in public comment. I've spoken about it in our committee before, to have some type of revenue source to fund these articles. And that was one of the reasons I didn't vote for the articles. There was no revenue source at the time. Not the fact that we're against wastewater, not the fact that we like the waters the way they are because we all know the waters are dirty and need to be clean, but our job is not policy. Our job is to look at the numbers and see if they work. And if they don't work, to come back to Mr. Collins and to our fine people here to see if we can get some compromise or information to try to make the numbers work so that we take the burden off the town. Bottom line, do as much as we can to take the burden off the taxpayer, because down the road, they're going to have more burden to pay. So, I'm inclined to, as we look at this, maybe using some of this money, I would be more inclined to use the $4 million than the whole amount. However, let me ask you a question. If we were to use the 4 and have to bond the 3.5, is it necessarily would have to use 3.5 down the road, or could we get that from the WIF or somewhere else, you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely a consideration, and I thought, going forward, okay, you bond it for, or ban it for 1 year. A ban is like a line of credit. You take it out, it's only good for a year. And at the end of the year, you pay it down. But you got to wait for the revenues to come in from the WIF and the wastewater stabilization before you can use it. And yeah, that's critical.
Right.
So some of it's, the majority of it's committed. The question becomes, when does the $54 million bond start with the state? And that's going to be July of 2025.
And Mr. Collins, when do you expect you would have to start budgeting for this new department for the sewer system?
And just to correct you, I'm not so sure you had that figure right in terms of what operationally, did you say 1 to 1.5 million?
I might, it's a guess.
Oh, okay.
88, I'd say 80
No.
to 1.5. I don't know.
Yes.
88,000 to 100, 800,000 to 150 million. I don't know.
True. I mean, obviously, when it's online, we are going to have, in my view, a contracted service. The person who should be the wastewater superintendent, we're this close to having that person's name announced. And once that person is on board, they will be responsible for the contracted services. My suggestion is not to go with town employees, but rather contracted services. That's always been the objective. That has always been part and parcel to the plan, and we would continue with that. So obviously, when it's online, yes, operationally, that would be additional funding that the town would need.
And do you have that?
Well, right now, we were concerned that we would be looking at a potential override in May. I don't want to put, in the words of Lynn Barbie, who might be here, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I will say that I don't think that's going to be necessary as it stands right now. And again, I don't want to,
We're guessing.
I don't want to beat the dead horse, but I want to say that my rationale was the 15.3 million was definitely much higher than anticipated. At least for me.
And the 7.5 million from GHD, they gave us that number, correct?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is a possibility that in the end, that figure might actually be less.
And did they give you a detailed budget for that 7.5 million?
Yes, well, detail in the sense that they were under a strict timeline, and probably in terms of, is GHD here?
No.
I know that they were under a tight timeline. We had the SRF deadline, and then I had the deadline to get the design and engineering into the board so you could execute the warrant. So I'm not going to suggest that the detail isn't there. I'm just going to say that they met their deadlines, and we will continue to comprehensively look at everything, including anything that was part and parcel to Phase 1, which is, as you know, now a part of the new Phase 2 to finish off. So if there's anything, as the finance director has pointed out to me, if there's anything in terms of design and engineering that would be duplicative, then obviously that's not going to be allowed.
Now, what is your rational opinion of not using any of free cash for this? Explain.
The reason is because A, you don't know what you've got coming. B, you're authorization to borrow. That doesn't mean it has to be borrowed at that
right.
time. My plan is to borrow something probably in February or March to cover the costs that are associated with the wastewater planning so we don't get knocked on free cash in June. And then if we're going to town meeting in May and asking for, if you move money in from free cash to wastewater stabilization, let's say it's $4 million, then another article is there to ask for that $4 million out of wastewater stabilization starting the next year to pay down the ban. That's the rationale. It's the exact same rationale I use for the $2.48 million.
And that's your opinion of how we should go?
Yes.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to make a comment. I anticipate that at the town meeting, there may be questions about why the Finance Committee did not recommend this article. And I want to explain that there was a critical timing issue. The night that we were required to vote on this, because there was a deadline within 3 days, we, the committee, received the article that night. I didn't before then even know what the Article 1 was going to be. Now, unfortunately, I missed the Select Board meeting, which had happened 3 days before, because I was out of town at a funeral, and I didn't get back till the day before. So I wasn't privy to what the Select Board had done, and I felt uncomfortable that I didn't have very much information other than we wanted to spend $7.5 million and ask our taxpayers for it. I just didn't feel comfortable at that point because I hadn't seen the website of the Sewer Commission, which I've since seen. And as of right now, I have enough information, and I'm not sure which way we're going to go on this free cash, but I have enough information that I'm absolutely behind this article. And I would be willing to tell people at town meeting that.
Does anybody else? Go ahead.
The $7.5 million is for design, is that correct? Okay, and that's what you're calling Phase 1?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other number which has been purported around...
It's option 9, Phase 2, a portion of Phase 2 and a portion of Phase 1.
And how big is this overall alligator? The number that keeps popping up is 88 million. Is that going to take us to the point where we'll have the wastewater treatment plant done, finished, running, and connected up to everybody's home for the 88 million?
Is the question, is that where we're completely done?
Yeah.
No.
So there's going to be betterments in order to... for
Well,
people-
Look, I'm not going to get into policies here for the Sewer Commission or for the Select Board. What I will say is you will have a number for town meeting in May, and GHD will be there at town meeting, readily available, along with hopefully our new wastewater superintendent.
What I'm trying to get to is how big is this alligator? Is the 88 million, is that going to be there? Is that the number?
The alligator?
Yeah,
This is in
He's
Florida.
asking the whole project.
That's the whole project, yeah.
What's the whole project going to cost?
Okay.
Yeah,
Right now, we're just taking a bite of the apple, and the next, what we approved is the next phase, which is, or what we recommended is the 88 million.
We haven't done anything around Walk White
We're still,
in these
there's
phases.
plenty of the town that that doesn't even complete 50% of the town.
Okay, that's what.
So, but there's a lot more, we don't have enough time to explain the whole, what's left and,
So the 88 million is not the
The-
whole portfolio.
no.
The
1,300 homes.
2015 plan called for 5 phases. I'll get it to you.
It did call for 5 phases, but we were told quite regularly that we may not have to go to 5 phases.
I'm not suggesting that you're going to have to do 5 phases in my term.
I would like to pull the,
I like how you put that, Rodney.
let's pull the meeting back, though, what
Yes,
we're
yes,
talking about, because otherwise we could be here all night.
Trail.
So I'd like to actually go back to the finance team because, you know, and then maybe take a consensus because it doesn't seem like there's many more questions unless someone wants to speak. But I'm looking at, I've been a selectman for about 8.5 years now. And I always remember us floating 10 and 12 million. In my memory, that's where free cash is floated. Knowing that this is, I understand that the year's not done, so I understand that conservative, we don't know what we don't know. I get that. That being said, I still would like to recommend or for us to consider some usage of free cash. And my thought process is actually using $3 million of free cash for Article 1. And my reasoning is, we've always floated at around that 12 million, and I think, Dawn, actually, you mentioned, the 12 million you actually came out of your mouth as like the magic floating number.
13, yeah, we've consistently been at 13.
So if I have this correctly, it's 15.3 right now, certified free cash. If we use 3 million, that would bring us down to 12.3 million. Still would be floating in the area where we've always floated. I think it would be encouraging to the taxpayers. I think it would encourage the townspeople. I think it would give them a little more confidence in, the next step. So without continuing on to dialogue, that it would be my recommendation, is to use $3 million in free cash.
Could I just ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
And it's actually directed to the Finance Committee. I know the vote that you took, and I respect all of you. I think you know that. I hope you know that. I'm just wondering, and I'm not here to make any political statements or put any pressure or anything like that. I'm just saying, would you be inclined to reconsider if hypothetically there was a different method to fund it? Because I think it's kind of critical to the overall process here. Because if the Select Board, the Sewer Commission, and the Finance Committee walk in unison to town meeting, I think things are inclined to go very smoothly. Whereas if there are concerns regarding the finances, and I understand that there are, I respect that. I'm just saying, if you do reconsider with a different formula, would you be inclined to think any differently? And if the answer is yes, then I would like for that discussion to take place.
Well, I'd like to actually, you know what, to be honest with you, I'd be curious to see what I don't know unless, I wouldn't, if I was in the Finance Committee's position, and I want to speak for you, but if I was, until you had a chance to discuss what that number is, I don't know if you can make that decision now, but that would be me. So I would be curious to know what I propose using $3 million in free cash. I am curious what the board, my fellow board members think, and also the Finance Committee thinks, because but to Mr. Collins' point, I would love it to be, I'm looking for it to be a unanimous vote like we did for Phase 1. That being said, I think it's going to take the entire, take us as working as a team to endorse that. to show the confidence in the town that we're endorsing this. But everybody has an opinion, and I just wanted to get this ball rolling. And so, again, $3 million of free cash, I'd be curious to see, listen to the rest of our board members and the finance committee, what your thought process is on that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm speaking for myself. I would be, and I've said it publicly, if there's, like what you said, if there's a different formula that we can get to some consensus and agreement, I like that. But I want, like to see the majority of whatever we ask for with free cash to be used and less money borrowed. So I would be more inclined to a 4 to 4.5, and let the rest go to the bond, because that's already taxpayers' money. Taxpayers are already, that's theirs. We could use that right now. And I think we should use the majority of that money for the taxpayers for that, and then bond the other one. I would be in at 4 to 4.5, for sure. That's my thought. I'd be willing to reconsider my vote. I can't speak for anybody else except me.
Anybody else? Please chime in, because
See, I wasn't there for the vote, so it's like, but the information I received tonight, even without using free cash, I'm more inclined to approve. My understanding was none of us had any idea of how this was gonna be funded originally
Yeah, we were
when
given
the
no
vote was taken.
information, and there was a deadline. We had to vote one way or another. It had nothing to do with
Clean water.
not wanting to approve the article.
so you have, I mean, that's the thing is, but if we can talk about how, if there's a possible grounds to come together.
Yep.
Yes.
The chance to revote and before town meeting, that can all be done.
Yes,
That's, you
absolutely.
guys have that authority. So just to move the process forward, again, now we have options, but now I'm looking, everybody,
I like the 3 million.
And when it comes down to it, the choice of how to fund it is between you and the town manager. And we're voting, our vote is, yes, should approval of the article to do so happen.
correct.
That's all our vote is. The final, at least, I think, from my point of view, I can get behind this article now, understanding what the finance team has in plan for possible financing of it, and not all of it coming on the burden of the taxpayer.
If I could just ask one question, because I'm just sort of in the clouds here. I just want to make sure that the Finance Committee realized that the original plan was to seek a debt exclusion, including but not limited to the two-thirds vote at town meeting and the ballot question. So you're saying you didn't know that?
Oh, no, we knew that, but we didn't have any other information, and we got the article that
night of
night
the
that we
meeting.
had to vote on it. So I read it just as soon as our meeting began, and it was just like, I don't really know much about this, other than, of course, I want clean water, and I want
Right.
this project to continue.
Yeah,
Again, I don't want to, their recommendation at that time, it's a moot point at this point, because what I'm looking for is, back to the question, if you don't mind, I don't mean to be, I don't want to be rude, it's just, you can change, you can come to a new, you could call it to a new vote, recommendation or not, that's before the town meeting, and you can make everybody be heard. Any other selectmen have anything else an opinion?
I mean, I too like the 3, utilizing the 3, fully understanding both Craig and Dawn's perspective, making decisions after we know defined numbers. I think yours gets us there. It's the best of both worlds. So, I mean, I'd support the 3 and myself.
Thank you, David. Carol?
I support what Greg has put on the table, because I think this article would have gone through with what we had originally put out, because we don't have to borrow the full amount until we need it.
Okay? Tom?
Where my support and my education, what I get, I really put a lot of faith in the two of you. And the way you present it, I think you did a great job, and I think that I'm behind your plan or any final plan that you would endorse.
And I just want to make it clear, we are not against utilizing free cash for this purpose. It's just, if you do it in May and you put the money into the wastewater stabilization at that point in time, you might be able to even put more in. I don't know. You know, that's the tough part about trying to make a decision right now. And that's the only reason we're saying that we would personally go, you know, we support going forward with the debt exclusion and then doing whatever you can in May
To put the money into the
to
stability.
pay down that
But
ban.
pay it down,
Yes,
right.
exactly.
We'd have more money to do that.
Possibly,
Yeah.
you know, we don't
But you
know
don't
at this
put
point in
the
time.
town at risk by holding off.
But you would feel more comfortable with going with a 3 million over a 4 or a 4.5?
I mean, that would give you
At-
more money in the end, yes. If you look at the analysis, it would, you know, give you
Is that
additional funds.
is that a yes or a no?
It's a
I'm
nod.
just trying to be funny here, but
Yeah.
money's
You know,
available,
that's not our
right.
decision,
Are you more
honestly. It's not
comfortable
our decision to make.
with, more comfortable than, with a 3 million free cash, usage of 3 million free cash than 4 or 4.5?
If we had to choose a number, yes.
Thank you.
If it was going to be, but I'm still saying we support our first.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Great job.
Michaela?
Thank you for the explanation. I still, based on all of the other towns I looked at with AAA ratings, looking at their percentage of free cash and looking at ours, I would fund the entire amount out of free cash, which would give you 7.8 million remaining, which is 10%, which is consistent with other towns with AAA bond rating. So that's just, I'm
Okay.
one person, that's where I stand.
Anybody else in the finance committee that we didn't hear from?
If I could just throw one more thing in, whatever you decide, trust me, I'll make it work.
I mean, we're going to have to ask for more money anyway in the end.
So true.
In different phases.
Right.
So,
That's, I'd like to hear a motion to move forward with a modification of Article 1 with using 3 million in free cash and 4.5 in, as stated in override, to borrow.
So move.
I'll second that.
All right, a first and a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any? Michaela?
For the sake of unity, I vote yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Carol?
no,
Yes.
David? And I'm a yes.
no, it passed.
So, yeah, so now,
So the Finance Committee, Chair will entertain a motion to rescind its vote on Article 1.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Greg?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Glenn? Richard?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Darlene?
I wasn't there to vote, but
This is to rescind the vote, and I'm a yes. The chair will now entertain a motion to approve the amended Article Number 1.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yeah, I think it's important that we use taxpayers' money, as much as we can in there. to move this forward and send a message to the town that not only are we trying to do the fiscally responsible thing, but the environmentally responsible thing as well.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Greg?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Darlene?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Nice.
Passes.
Mr.
I
Chair.
believe we would need to make a vote to recommend as well, correct? Because we just made a recommendation to change, but now I'd look for a motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All right, first and second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. Mr. Whedon?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
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 And I'm a yes. Unanimous.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, I just want the Finance Committee and the Select Board to know that when this issue first came up, I did consult with legal counsel. You can have a motion prepared, which I will now make sure he does, prepare a motion, and it will be discussed at your joint meeting just before the town meeting. So that will be on the agenda for the purposes of preparing the motion and having the funding mechanism ready to go. It will be ready.
Great. Thank you.
And will the town be notified of this amendment prior to town meeting? Or is it too close?
That's going to be tricky.
That's going to be a difficult task, but, you know,
Maybe the
I will
papers.
consult with the town clerk relative to getting the information out. And maybe my friend in the press can get something out Friday.
That and maybe put a information up on the Mashpee cable
We
channel as
will
well.
get information up as quickly as we can and wherever we can. But obviously, a mailing at this point is not going to happen.
No.
Unanimous recommendation. Headline. All right, not hearing any, could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Finance Committee, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Any opposition? Hearing none, passed by unanimous consent.